Welcome to Still Standing, a podcast about faith, service, resilience, and leadership. I'm your host, Dr. Leslie Glanton, retired Army Colonel, healthcare leader, and woman of purpose. After 13 years, I've earned my doctorate in health administration, and now I'm on a mission to amplify voices that inspire and uplift. Before we begin, please note the views shared in this podcast are my own and do not reflect the views of my employer or any affiliated organization. Now let's begin episode 2. Hi, this is Dr. Glanton, and welcome back to Still Standing episode 2. Let's recap episode 1. In episode 1, I shared a powerful story of how I served as a NICU nurse in Baghdad, helping to save a premature baby in a combat zone. Well, that experience not only shaped everything I believe about leadership, faith, and sacrifice, but that journey also didn't stop there. Today, in episode 2, I will share how that foundation led me to the military at 40 years old, and how the lessons of service became the guiding force for my life. Episode 2, The Woman in the Uniform. I never would have thought that I would have been in the Army or joined any military service at all. As I mentioned in episode 1, how being in Baghdad and being in combat changed my life. But even more importantly, the transition that I made to even join the military at age 40 was even more impactful. So let's talk about and go back and see how that happened. I remember many years ago, I was working as a civilian nurse. In fact, surprisingly, my experience was in ICU as a critical care nurse in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I had never entertained being in the military and didn't really know anybody in the military. I was married at the time and had small children, and I was doing like most people do, work every day, hard, doing my job. And in fact, little did I know, I didn't even have the qualifications to get into the military at the time. I was what they called an associate degree nurse. I had a 2-year degree from a community college, and I was proudly working as a nurse. So I began my journey with my family in Philadelphia, working in many of the Philadelphia hospitals, working back and forth in various facilities. I started in the VA, and then because having small children, it became very difficult to manage childcare. So I ended up joining an agency where I was able to have better control of my time. So here I am working, thinking everything is wonderful. And I lived in the suburbs. I had my children in private school, and I thought I was off to a wonderful start. But I didn't know how difficult it would be just trying to maintain a family. I was working all the time. I didn't have a lot of time. And one day I was living in a very nice suburbs, and I had some wonderful neighbors. And they were retired military. Well, it was one Saturday evening. We were invited over, my husband and I, and we were talking to them, and I was in total awe of this young family. The husband was a retired senior enlisted personnel that had retired, and his wife, to my surprise, had never worked. And they had spent 20 years in the military, and they were waiting as they transitioned to their civilian life to build a home. Well, I couldn't believe this. This was unheard of. How were they doing these? So I was sitting with anticipation, trying to understand how they had done this. So I listened intently, wondering if this was something that I could do. Well, by the end of the evening, I decided that I needed to investigate it. The husband, I remember him saying, well, you're a nurse. You could be an officer in the military. You should go and investigate it. And I had never, ever thought of this prior. So on that Monday, I was in my excitement. I talked to my husband and I said, I think I need to find out what this is about. So I rushed down to the nearest military recruitment center to talk to them about how I could find out or possibly even join the military. Little did I know it wasn't that easy. But to my surprise, I found out that I did not have what they wanted. Well, here I am, a 10-year nurse, ICU experience, an adult ICU nurse. I had an associate's degree. I believed I was educated, but yet I did not have the requirements that they were looking for. They wanted a bachelor's degree, registered nurse, and I didn't have that. So to my horror, I decided, I have to do something about it. So I tried to find out, what did I need to do? I went home and I discussed it with my husband, and I was very upset because I said I have 10 years experience. I'm ICU, and they said that I couldn't join the military. So I went off to find out how to get my bachelor's degree, something I hadn't thought about in many years. I didn't feel the need at that time. So I joined a program where I could do an accelerated degree for my bachelor's. Well, there were some minor problems. I was 38, and the cutoff for me getting in the military was 40. So I didn't have a whole lot of time. So to make a long story short, I did do accelerated classes. I challenged some classes, and I got through in a very short period of time. In 1 year, I got my degree from an online program, and I went off to apply to get into the military. So by the time I got accepted into the Army, I was 40 years old. And so that's how that happened. Of course, there were many challenges with my family because they didn't know what the military was. But at that time, that was the best decision that I could have made. So in my excitement, I began to prepare my family for our new journey, joining the military. That was an exciting time for me because the excitement of not the unknown, but finally making it and accomplishing that was a big success for me at that time. And I really was feeling good, even though I was nervous. So that decision to join, that's what helped me. It's my neighbors and talking to them and deciding that this would be a good thing for my family. So then here I am, we're ready to go, and it's time to go for me to go to training, what they call officer training, because I was now a bachelor's degree, I was a registered nurse, and so I was off to officer training. So what did that look like? Well, you talk about being nervous. I was so nervous because I didn't know anything about the military. I knew nursing. So I had to start preparing. I would have to run, and I'll have to do push-ups, things that I hadn't done. I was a mother. I had 3 children. That was not my daily routine. And here I was completely 100% out of my comfort zone. But my desire to be in was greater. So I found strength through my family and the support of my family. And I began the preparation for getting ready to go into this officer training, which was about 12 weeks. So off to San Antonio, I went to officers basic training. Well, initially the excitement and meeting new people, that was just overwhelming. And it was, for me, a no-fail mission. Here I have my family and my children, and I just can't fail. And I looked around, and I was 40 years old, and everybody was a lot younger than me, and I had to find some strength from somewhere. And there was a lot of nervousness and fear, and frankly, just praying that I could do it. And so the good news is I did do it. I completed the 12 weeks, and then I was off to go back and get my family and move to our new home. So my first assignment as a new leader was at Fort Hood in Glanton, Texas. Oh, what a beautiful place. I had never been outside of Philadelphia. There was no reason. And I certainly had never moved to another state. So here I am with my family and my children, and we're off to moving to a new home in Glanton, Texas. So there we are. We have a beautiful home, and my family was there. My mother came to help me, and I went to pick up the children, and they were excited and nervous. And that began my getting my family started. And I never forget when I reported into the hospital, Darnell Medical Center in Glanton, Texas. I was excited with anticipation. I was a first lieutenant and I was going off to do good things. So I went down to the nursing office and I knocked on the door. Hello. Hi, my name is Leslie and I was Lieutenant at that time, Goodwin. And I introduced myself and they told me to come in, and I sat down and they looked through and they said, oh, you're an experienced ICU nurse. And I was like, very proud. Yes, I am. I have been doing open heart in the private sector. So I felt very comfortable in my skills. Well, they said, to my surprise, we have a shortage and we're going to put you in the NICU. Well, I was like, a NICU? I'm an adult ICU nurse. So I didn't know anything about babies. So here I am, an adult ICU nurse, my first assignment, and they put me in a NICU. It was the funniest thing, not at the time, of course, but it was funny to me. So I go to the ICU, and I was the only and the first officer to ever be in the NICU because it was an area that was mainly civilian nurses. So here I am, an officer, first lieutenant, in a completely unknown environment where I have to work with civilian nurses in an area which I had no experience. So you can imagine that was a very challenging time for me, not only as a nurse, but as an officer and a military leader in that environment. But I did get through that. During that time that I joined the military in 2001. But by the time 2004 came around, of course you know that we were in an active war, which is what I discussed in episode 1. Who knew that the experience that I gained on my first assignment as a NICU nurse would be used to do something so profound as helping the people of Iraq during a time of crisis and doing that amazing surgery for the Iraqi child that I took care of for 1 year. So what have I learned? As I look back over how I joined the military, that challenges with my family, overcoming my fears and feelings of not being ready for such a major change, and then going to my first assignment with my family, accepting a position where I had never worked in before, and then going off into combat and utilizing those very skills. It reflects on how the military shaped not only my personal growth, strength, but the resilience. And that's what I've learned. I've learned that the military experiences throughout my 21 years has been impactful in who I am today and have been a major part of my faith and my service. And I look forward to being able to share the amazing experiences that I had. So again, thank you for sharing this time with me in episode 2. And episode 3, I will share another very important milestone in my experience in the military, and that was COVID. And I can't wait to tell you exactly what happened during that time of the pandemic for the entire world. Thank you again. My name is Dr. Glanton, and I thank you for being with me here on Still Standing. Talk to you next time.